one.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Wolves, they rally all the way back. They were 23 down, but they can't hold on. They can't finish. Final score versus the Warriors tonight, 113-103. What's going on back in the lab? Back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman with me as always. He's live from the Target Center. Give him a follow at JRBorman13. Jack, lots to get into tonight. The early offensive struggles continued, plus a great showing from the Wolves bench, really, to rally them all the way back. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, man, both teams desperate for a win tonight. Warriors, they were on a 3-game skid. They just got embarrassed by, 50-some points. Wolves got embarrassed by Cat and the Knicks on Thursday night, too. So Wolves' perspective couldn't really started worse for the Wolves. I mean, they were down 21 in the second quarter. You're thinking, oh, man, the wheels have officially fallen off. We're toast. Ant was 1 for 9. Conley 0 points at halftime. Julius is 1 for 8 at halftime. The bench kind of comes alive, gets them back into it. They end up rallying all the way back. They take the lead. Then in crunch time, it just kind of felt like they ran out of gas. I don't know. Steph Curry does Steph Curry things. He drops 2 bombs on them from 3, pushes the lead back up to double digits. That was kind of all she wrote. Ant with 19. DiVincenzo tied with him for the team lead with 19 points as well. But Wolves dropped to 14 and 13 on the year. I want you to start us off with kind of your broader big picture A topics before we get into all the nuts and bolts. Like, this team had won 6 of 7, then the loss to New York, kind of in embarrassing fashion, right? And now tonight, just like, how you feeling right now? What are your vibes right now with this team?
They're not great.
Not great, Bob.
No. And I think it has a lot to do with the manner in which they're losing some of these games. I think getting absolutely blown out in the way that they did, with the fans moaning and groaning. And I think the Timberwolves players really feel the weight on their shoulders and the pressure of this team just not gelling the way that everyone, myself included, anticipated they would, considering, they are bringing back so much of their rotation from last season, and Donte DiVincenzo should have been a very seamless fit into what this team was supposed to be. And you saw that tonight. I think that is closer to the player that the Timberwolves are getting in the trade than the player that we've seen for most of the season. And if people want to, be frustrated with me for that, then bring it on. But yeah, I just think that's a serious problem with that. Just that the chemistry looks off. I'm getting texts from people, saying, why does this team not talk to each other on the bench in timeouts? Why do they look so disconnected when things aren't going great? And I think that what I really loved and enjoyed about last season's team is that when things started to go really poorly, they just dug in and fought like hell and played really hard and took everything that they did on both ends of the floor up a level. And we just haven't seen that from this season, or from this season's team, for a good chunk of the season. And it just feels like, on some level, trying to square peg a round hole, right? And it's not from a lack of trying. I mean, I was sitting in this room. It's just off the hallway from when the Timberwolves were, kind of coming back through the hallway, and I can hear a bunch of different players, yelling and cussing because they want it so bad, and it's frustrating, and it's starting to mount up. And I think you're seeing that on the court, and certainly you're kind of seeing it in how some of the players are interacting with one another, not necessarily in like a blow up bad way, just that I think, guys are frustrated as a whole. And it's, when you're really frustrated, sometimes it's hard not to take it out on some other people, even if it's not warranted. So sure. I think we were on here, and I sat in this chair, and we talked about that Rockets game. As I felt like that was an inflection point of something is going to turn for the better here, because they're starting to rediscover some of that swagger and magic on the defensive end of the floor that they had for so long. And they rip off that run of 6 of 8 games holding opponents under 95 points. And And I was talking about it with Ben the other night of, it just feels like that type of loss against the Knicks on national TV, where I'm sure people on TV could hear the home crowd booing them, could hear the home crowd kind of moaning and groaning when, different players had the ball or took different shots or made different decisions. That's a loss that's not easy to come back from. And you thought that, the Wolves kind of were blessed welcoming a Warriors team that just lost in Memphis on Thursday by 51 points. So it's kind of two teams in a similar spot. And then they're given another gift with Draymond Green being out in this game with left ankle soreness, even though that left ankle looked pretty good when he was jumping off the bench to yell at refs in the second half. But they don't have him. And again, it's a starting lineup of Steph Curry, Dennis Schroeder, and in the backcourt there, and then you have Andrew Wiggins and Kyle Anderson on the wing and Trace Jackson Davis in the middle. It's just not a lineup with a lot of spacing. So you think it's a good opportunity for the defense to kind of get back on track, and hopefully the offense can kind of find and discover some flow, considering that you're playing against a team that gave up 144 points in their last outing, but it just didn't happen. And in the fourth quarter, starting in the fourth quarter, just before I get there, fourth quarter notwithstanding, that is the exact type of performance that the Timberwolves need from Julius Randle. And just in the game as a whole, it's exactly what they need from Dante DiVincenzo. I thought that was as hard as Julius Randle had played for the first three quarters. I thought he was the catalyst for a lot of things that went really well for this team, and was a huge reason why the Timberwolves were able to claw back into this game and did an excellent job of helping get Rudy Gobert going, which we'll get into a little bit later. But in the fourth quarter, Steph Curry's just a trump card, right? 13 points, made 3 of his 4 threes. One of them shouldn't have happened because there was an illegal screen. I think it was set by Gary Payton on Jaden McDaniels. I think that was the one to go up 8. That kind of was the nail in the coffin. But the Wolves didn't do a good enough job of winning the non-Steph Curry minutes more emphatically than they did. Steph Curry was a plus 20 in a game they won by 10. So the Wolves won those non-Steph Curry minutes by 10. They won them 28-18. So the Warriors scored just 18 points in the 14 minutes that Steph Curry sat. I can't do. If you want to do what Steph sat 14 minutes, 48 divided by 14, and then you multiply that by 18. They're on pace for what I can't do the math in my head. I'm sorry. Live can't do the math there. It's a horrible offensive rating.
Right. It's not good.
And they're on pace to score, less than 70 points on that pace over the course of a game. And the Timberwolves only scored 28 points in those 14 minutes. And again, that's on pace for sub 100 points. And that's just not good enough against a defense that is missing one of the best defensive players of our generation. And just frankly, they didn't do enough to build themselves kind of that safety net that we've talked about, for so long with Jokic and the Nuggets. And of course, Steph and the Warriors is certainly a team that falls into that category, with them just being so great with Steph on the floor and so poor with him off the floor. And I just think, again, only winning them by 10 was really tough, especially when Ant starts the fourth quarter. Steph's on the floor, which is unique for Ant, and Steph starts the fourth quarter on the bench like he normally does, and they just weren't able to create much separation from the Warriors at all. They just kind of let the Warriors keep hanging around, and a lot of that was just because of fouls. The Warriors didn't make a field goal in the time that Steph Curry sat in the fourth quarter, but they went 5 of 6 from the free throw line, and that was kind of what kept them in it. And then again, what was, just tough to watch a little bit is just the defense kept them in the game all night long, right? After just a putrid offensive start. And then they allowed 10 straight scores at one point in the fourth quarter, which I think was just a little frustrating for fans, considering how in rhythm the offense was in the second half, scoring 66 points in the second half. That was a heck of a response from the Timberwolves, considering they only put up 37, I think, in the first half. So, but again, besides the Steph Curry going nuclear, 2 really other important key areas that the Wolves struggled with early in the quarter. They allowed Golden State to have 3 offensive rebounds for 6 second chance points that were backbreakers once Curry got back into the game. And then the Wolves started 0 of 4 from the free throw line in this quarter, and they finished 6 of 11 in the fourth quarter. And those are just margin plays, complete controllables that you have to be better with if you want to turn, some of these losses into wins and kind of complete the comeback and dig out of some of these mighty holes that you're leaving for yourself. So I just, you have to give the Timberwolves credit for the way that they fought back. I think with how bad the vibes were in the start of the fourth or the first quarter and the second quarter, we can kind of get into that a little bit more here in the next segment. But I think it's just got to be frustrating for the players considering that they dug themselves that deep of a hole, played so well, and really showed some resilience throughout the third and fourth quarters to get back into it. And the fans were right there with them. I thought the crowd did an excellent job of trying to help will this team to the finish line. And it's just kind of one of those, where you just get the wind knocked out of you and you're just kind of sitting there trying to find any air you can. It's just not a great feeling. So
for sure. A gut punch for sure, especially again after that monster rally back. Again, you talked about, you looked at the missed free throws that would have came up huge at the end, but we can sit here and nitpick all night. We'll keep getting into a lot more of the nitty gritty here. Let's talk about Rudy Gobert's best game we've seen in a while as well. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel is giving you a chance at a huge return with $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 bet. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get in on some NBA future action while you're there. Anthony Edwards MVP odds. It's dropped a little bit, sitting at 12-1 now. That's still some great value. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Again, plenty of bad to talk about, nitpick, but let's try to find a positive here. I know you said this was one of Rudy Gobert's best games we've seen in a while. When the offense looked its best, ironically, it looked like it included a lot of Rudy Gobert easy buckets, getting to the line a lot. How much is he going to be part of this long-term answer, I guess, with these offensive struggles? And more importantly, just tonight, what'd you see from his game that you liked so much?
Yeah, I think for Rudy specifically, it just felt like he was the guy that they turned to when they needed a lot of, just consistent offense. And I think a lot of it kind of he was kind of the impetus for how they dug out of it because, they had good process in the first quarter, the first 5-6 minutes, generated a lot of good looks. And then everything kind of started weighing on guys and lacked confidence. They didn't look connected. They had a lot of shaky possessions with turnovers, almost turnovers, weird loose balls, missed shots, and some of the spacing was bad. And it really doesn't help when Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle started as poorly as they did, considering they started 1 of 9 from the floor and had 4 combined points in the first quarter.
It's terrible.
And they really found it after that 7.5 minute stretch in the second quarter without scoring, or kind of bridging the first quarter and the second quarter. I thought that Rudy was excellent. He set a ton of screens. He did a great job spacing around Julius Randle when Randle was driving. Did a great job kind of coming across the front of the rim to make himself available for Randle and others that were on the drive. And the guys that were on the drive did an excellent job of finding him. He played through contact. He finished inside really well. He got himself to the free throw line, which I think was really important. I thought that Rudy and Randle were excellent in kind of bringing the physicality to a front line in Golden State that just isn't the most capable of withstanding that for extended stretches. And the way that they really kind of worked things to the free throw line, I thought was really important in the second quarter. Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle were combined 7 of 8 from the free throw line in that quarter. And the Wolves had 4 offensive rebounds for 10 second chance points, I believe, in that quarter as well. So the way that they really turned to Rudy to get things going, I think is important in the way that they're, and I think they're going to have to continue to use Rudy as a source of offense to help get them through some of these rough patches that they're having offensively, because what Rudy does, he can do every single night. Rudy can set screens, create space for ball handlers like he did for Ant. You saw in the fourth quarter, Ant kind of got going as well. In that fourth quarter, hit those 2 pull-up threes off of screens from Rudy Gobert. He can do that. He can set off-ball screens for guys. He can play in the handoff game. I mean, he just makes life a lot easier for other guys in ways where you don't necessarily need to call plays in order for him to be effective. And he also, had that putback in the early part of the third quarter too. I think it was just everything that you wanted to see from Rudy. And then, let's get into the third quarter. I thought he set an excellent tone in that third quarter where he starts it off with some really good defense, gets a putback, has an emphatic block on Jackson Davis. Then Randall finds him in those kind of the ways that I was talking about for 2 huge points. And was a really important part of the Timberwolves starting 7 of 8 from the floor, or 8 of 9 from the floor in the third quarter, and finding some rhythm. And I just think that, when you get the ball moving and you get guys like, Randall, who can play really well off the catch if he just makes quick decisions and is a good passer when he wants to be. If you get the ball swinging, you can get guys playing off the catch, playing downhill in 5-on-4 situations, and force the defense to commit to the ball handler and kick the ball to the opposite slot and then drive off that and dump it off to Rudy, like we saw, Dante do a couple times tonight. It's just, he is kind of a canary in the coal mine for how well the rest of the offense is functioning. And I just think it's unfortunate that we're now in year 3 of the Rudy Gobert experience. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like Anthony Edwards still hasn't figured out how to find Gobert consistently in the pick and roll game. And I thought he did a okay job of it tonight. He had a couple of nice bounce passes to split, hedges and blitzes at the top of the key that got Rudy the ball in the middle of the floor to kind of pass in the short roll a little bit and make some plays. But Ant really has to do a better job of finding Gobert when he's open, because there are plenty of times when Ant can throw a lob or hit Gobert in the middle of the floor when he's rolling to the rim, and he just doesn't do that. And when the Wolves would play the Jazz, when Conley and Gobert and Ingles and Donovan Mitchell were at the core of that team, those guys all seemingly hit Rudy every single time he was wide open. Mm-hmm. And Rudy Gobert would have so many of these games where he'd have 22 points, 17 rebounds, and just destroy the Wolves because they played really well around Gobert, and they made that Gobert pick and roll the primary focus of their offensive attack. And it just feels like, for as much as Gobert set screens, they just don't do a good enough job of finding him when he is open on simple plays where you're not asking him to do much more than catch the ball when he's wide open and go up for an uncontested dunk or finish a lob. I think Rudy Gobert has proven, even though his hands haven't been great in a lot of situations, that when you throw the ball up to him and he can catch it, very rarely does he miss it and not throw it back down. Mm-hmm. So I think it's some low-hanging fruit like that Ant still has to get better with.
Well, let's. I just want to break off that real quick. Hold that thought. I don't want to interrupt you, but the starting backcourt, right? The past 2 nights, the past 2 games, very hot and cold, more cold than hot. Conley only 3 points tonight, wasn't great versus the Knicks. Ant, as you pointed out, less than 10 points for most of this game until the final 15, 18 minutes or so. How much of these offensive problems start there in that backcourt? And I guess, where's your panic meter at? I mean, we could talk 30 minutes just on Ant and what he's going through, and not only the micro, but the macro as well, like game to game, but like big picture, still figuring out kind of his role and identity, being the leader without Cat here and all that stuff. But just the last 2 games, this backcourt, where's your kind of panic meter at with Mike, and then with Ant, just kind of big picture as well?
Yeah, I think that Mike has certainly taken a bigger step back than I would have anticipated personally. And I think you have to give him some grace in that, obviously, what is he, 36, 37 years old now. Mm-hmm. And I don't really fault Mike all that much, because you can't expect the world from him, honestly, at his age and his role. Yeah. And in this offense, his role isn't meant to be, this supersized, 14 points, 8 assists, like a lot of other point guards in the league. I think for Mike, it's to just kind of help Ant get in rhythm, help, Rudy get involved and get touches in the pick and roll, and then, knock down the occasional open 3. I think with Mike, it hasn't really been issues with him as a playmaker or him as a defender. I don't see defenses continually bullying him and picking on him defensively. I just think, again, it's if he made more open shots, I think that would solve a lot of the issues. And I know he has a left wrist issue that is not on the injury report, that is going to be a factor for the whole season. But
so should he be playing less minutes, do you expect? Should he not be starting as much? Is it just
think,
hey, if you're not going to play him as many minutes, just give him the night off completely?
I think trying to find nights off for him would be beneficial for sure. Yeah. No question about it. I think just one of the, bigger picture things here, I guess, I think one of the more frustrating parts of this season as a whole is that you haven't really gotten Rob Dillingham any meaningful minutes over a consistent period of time. And if you would have told me that the Wolves were 14-13 or whatever they are right now at this point in the season, my first question probably would have been like, has Rob Dillingham been playing a lot of minutes? Like, I'm fine with losing. I'm fine with the Timberwolves not being at the very tippy top of the Western Conference as long as you're building towards
soaking up some valuable minutes and reps here. Yeah,
correct.
With the young guys.
And I think that for Mike to be struggling or regressing more than we would have anticipated, and for Rob to not have been getting meaningful minutes while that's going on, I think it's kind of like a two wrongs don't make a
for sure.
There's a multiplicative effect there that is making it exponentially more bad. A great way of saying that, but
no, I get you.
But I think
we all know exactly what you're saying.
Yep. Again, like you have Dante, you have Na, and I think it's more on the rest of the roster for those two guys not stepping up and playing well enough when offensively, when Mike hasn't been himself. And I think it's probably more on Dante than Na. I don't think you could really ask for Na to be playing a whole lot more minutes, or not a whole lot more minutes, a whole lot better offensively than he has, for the majority of the season, considering the way that he's played in catch and shoot, has added some off the dribble stuff going to his left in the mid range and has been finishing really well. It's been a largely efficient playmaker. I just think you need Ant to be more of a superstar player on a night to night basis. And I just feel like Ant's been a superstar player on maybe 60% of the nights, or 50% of the nights. And I think that Ant is extremely unselfish in that if any of his teammates have it going, and you saw when Nas had it going in the third quarter, Ant really tried to find Nas and find Dante when he had it rolling, and find Rudy, and find, Jaden to try to get him some open shots. Like he's as unselfish as it comes, no question about it. But I think sometimes when things aren't going great, like we saw in the first quarter, like we saw at points in the second quarter, he just doesn't do enough to, I think, kind of grab the game by the horns a little bit and force his imprint on the game and just kind of say, you know what, guys, I got this. And we saw a lot more of that last season. And maybe there was just more confidence from him, knowing that Carl was also there and he could trust another guy to score, whether it be 25, 30 points in any given night. But it's just a little concerning to me how passive he's been in some of those situations, and how he's just kind of gotten lost in the
Has he looked hesitant? Has he been hesitant? There was a good quote from him that was like, dude, I haven't been shooting I haven't been scoring a lot of 2-point shots because every time I drive to the hole, there's 3 guys there, man. There's just not a lot I can do. But has he been hesitant just overall? Is it the lack of like closing, like being that superstar in the big moments late in games, closing game, being the leader, the guy, you're the guy now. What has disappointed you most, or maybe not disappointed, just concerned you? Back to your word, concerned, maybe.
Yeah, and I think if you pull up that comment that Sean has there, like I think that's a very fair comment there, and maybe not the last part of it, I would agree with, but
okay.
But right. The first part of it, I think is fair, in that you just need more spacing around Ant. And I think if you want to fully maximize the Ant Rudy Gobert partnership, you just need as much spacing around him as possible. And I think part of it too is that Ant sees that there's no spacing and he just doesn't cut as much. And what's really frustrating is that when Ant does cut, his teammates don't necessarily find him. Like there's a lot of times when Ant tries to cut off of Randall, and it doesn't work. And because Randall just doesn't see him or doesn't pass the ball, or because Rudy's also standing right there where Ant's trying to cut. And so I think that that's part of it. But what's part of it also for me is that I think that Ant is kind of discouraged by what's happening offensively right now. And he's then being a little too passive earlier on in games. And then when he's not really into the game or doesn't really have a flow or a rhythm, that's when he kind of starts to force it. And it's trying to just, I think if they can try to get him into the game a little bit more earlier on in first quarters, like I think when the Wolves offense was really rolling earlier on in the season, when Ant was having these, ginormous first quarters where he was having, 12, 14, 16, I think he had 24 points in a first quarter earlier this season against Dallas. Like, I think that's part of it too. And I think the earlier you can get him involved, the more aggressive he's going to be. And then you can use that scoring aggression to open things up for everyone else. And that's when you can start to let that playmaking go. Like we saw him do really, really well in the second half of this game. I didn't really have a whole lot of issue with the way that Ant played in the second half. I thought his playmaking was really strong in the second half and wasn't trying to take away, the rhythm that everyone else was finding playing through Rudy and Randall in the first part of the third quarter, and then Nas the second part of the third quarter. So I think the more that his playmaking can kind of be secondary to his scoring, get his scoring involved first, and then have the playmaking come off of that, I think would be a lot better.
Yeah.
And right now it feels like it's kind of the opposite, and that just doesn't really work out super well when the spacing isn't great. I think you're helping the spacing by being more of a scorer, try to shoot more threes, force the defense to play out on you, and then but Finch also said before the game tonight, and a comment that I thought was great, that, the spacing is certainly a problem, but the spacing becomes more of a problem when players aren't passing the ball quick enough. Players aren't moving without the ball enough. They're not setting screens for each other. They're not cutting. They're not doing all of those things that can help make the spacing look a lot better and the offense flow a lot easier, like we saw in the third quarter tonight. And it can happen. Even with this lineup, it can happen. Julius Randle did a great job in the first part of this season creating threes for his teammates, driving into the middle of the lane, kicking it out, and everyone kind of playing off of that. And it just hasn't happened. And I think it looks really bad when it doesn't happen. It looks really good when it does happen. And they just haven't really found that middle ground that they can consistently have, where even if it's a middle of the pack, anywhere from 10 to 17th in offensive rating while having a top 5 defense, I think that's kind of the path to success for the Timberwolves, but they just aren't, the players aren't doing what they need to do individually consistently enough for that to work. And that buck falls on Anthony Edwards right now. It falls on Julius Randle, falls on Dante DiVincenzo. It falls on Rudy Gobert for not forcing his way into games, whether it be on the offensive glass or trying to get his teammates involved. It falls on Mike Conley for some of his three-point shooting. It falls on Jaden McDaniels for not making enough of his wide open threes. I mean, it falls on everybody.
It's not one thing, is it, Jack?
No,
it's not
and
one
I
thing.
think if every player can focus on like, hey, this is my role, this is what I need to do better, and just do that one thing,
play for the guy next to you,
20% better, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
This team is still extremely talented, and there's a lot of good pieces, and they're playing far less than the sum of their parts right now. And because of that, a lot of people are frustrated with Chris Finch. And I get that frustration to a certain extent, but Chris Finch also can't make wide open shots. Chris Finch can't shoot 17 of 25 from the free throw line. And there's some more of those things where I think players have to take a little bit more pride in what's going on. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So
it's been frustrating for sure. Great breakdowns right there. We only got a couple minutes left, but I want to talk about this brutal schedule coming up. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by BetterHelp. When your schedule, it's packed with work projects and more. It's so easy to start to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they're more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, it's time to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, we only got a couple minutes left here. I will ask you about the Atlanta game coming up Monday and then this tough schedule, but just 60 seconds left. Nas, DiVincenzo, they were fun to watch, if nothing else. Just kind of unload the clip, these last 60 seconds on tonight's game, what you saw.
Yeah, I think for sure. Nas Reid was incredible in that third quarter. Had 8 huge points that helped get them back in front. Had that huge chase down block, hit the go ahead 3, was awesome. Was making a ton of great decisions, and was a ton of fun to watch in that third quarter. He finished with 10 points in that third quarter. So I think that Nas deserves a lot of credit for the way that he played, especially in that second half. Mm-hmm. And there's obviously some people that are clamoring for Nas to close the game, and I think that's a fair gripe. But it's also really hard to play the last 16 or 17 minutes of the game, and there's probably a middle ground to be struck of getting Nas out, getting a breather, but also trying to get him back in. With maybe 4.5 minutes left, maybe get him a 3-minute breather or something like that, so that he would have been able to help them close the game. I thought that Finch closing with DiVincenzo was a nice way of kind of recognizing Dante for having what was his best game as a Timberwolf. And Dante has pretty quietly had 2 really solid games in a row that have been much closer to the New York version of Dante than what we've seen for the majority of his time in Minnesota. 19 points on 7-12 shooting, 3-6 from 3, 4 boards, 4 dimes, 2 steals. Played with a lot more swagger tonight. And I thought Julius Randle did a phenomenal job of trying to create some transition opportunities off of rebounds where he grabbed it and flew up the floor himself and sought out DiVincenzo because he knows how good of a transition player DiVincenzo was during their time together in New York. And I think that, trying to get DiVincenzo more involved in transition is where I think he really thrives, and he can kind of get that mojo and swagger and energy back. And I like that Finch was willing to mess with the rotation as well. And it came out a lot sooner than he normally does in the first quarter and in the third quarter, and then played the entire fourth quarter. And part of that was in part because he wanted to have Jaden McDaniels match minutes with Steph Curry. And I thought Jaden McDaniels, for the most part, did a really good job on Steph Curry. You look at the final line and you see he has 31 points, 10 assists, 10 of 21, 7 of 16 shooting. But he made Steph earn a lot of what he had. And some of the scores that Steph had were just kind of in these broken down scramble situations when, there were loose balls or Jaden, wasn't able to get matched up with Steph because it was a transition possession, whatever the case may be. And again, he made it really tough for Steph. And again, you look at the rest of the starting lineup for Golden State, and there wasn't a whole lot there. It was really just the majority of the Golden State bench that played pretty well tonight. They had 46 bench points. That's obviously a great number. So I liked that he was willing to kind of mess with the rotation, and that the Wolves defense did, for the most part, make it really difficult on a Warriors starting 5 that didn't offer a whole lot of spacing as they should have. But again, it was just the offense in the first quarter and the second quarter that really killed them. Again, the Timberwolves had 37 points in the first half. There have only been 4 sub 35 point first halves in the NBA this season, and they were really flirting with that until they made some free throws there in the second quarter. But for them to shoot 6 of 22, 27% in the first quarter, and then to come back, really for the first half as a whole, shoot 27%. On 12 of 44 shooting. I think they had the same 6 of 22 in the second quarter as well. It was just really tough. And then to have, almost as many turnovers as you have made field goals in the first half was pretty tough. So
last 5 games of the 2024 year: at Atlanta, at Dallas, at Houston, San Antonio at home, and then at Oklahoma City. What is your New Year's resolution wish for the Timberwolves these next 5 games? What are you just praying you want to see, or what should their New Year's resolution be, I guess, over these last 5 games here before we enter 2025? That is a gauntlet, my friend, right there. 4 tough road games for sure.
It is. And I think you just got to play really hard.
You
got to play really hard for 48 minutes. And I think the Timberwolves played really hard for 2/3 of this game. Yeah. And if they would have played hard for the first third of this game, they would have been fine and they would have won this game. But this is a pretty tough loss considering that they don't have the Warriors don't have Draymond Green. Mm-hmm. And you look at that starting 5 and you see that the Wolves lose to that starting 5. It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
No question about it. So I think if you just play super hard and have your defense keep you in games like they did tonight, those are for the most part, controllable things. These are all teams that the Wolves have very, outside of Atlanta, that they have very good familiarity with and understand what they need to do, are very familiar with the personnel and the players. And the other team, they've already played Houston multiple times, I think, San Antonio multiple times. They've played Dallas already, but they played them in the series last year. So, those are all things that the Wolves, or all teams that the Wolves can beat if they string it together on both ends of the floor. But you got to control what you can control, which is the defensive end, playing really hard, taking some pride in your work and what you do, and just hope that, you can make a few more shots. I mean, again, the Wolves 14 of 38 from three, 37%, right around the NBA average. You make 3 or 4 more threes, you're right there in a game like this where that can be the great equalizer. So I think, again, if you can just make a few more threes, shoot a little bit better than 68% from the free throw line, like the offense can be good enough to get you over the hump if your defense shows up. The Wolves will just have no chance of competing with Dallas, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, or Atlanta if those games become a shootout or if their defense doesn't show up. And that's just the reality of the team. And it puts more pressure on the defense. And, then you get string like you had tonight in the fourth quarter where the defense isn't as strong and it just puts way more pressure on the offense. And that's just really tough for a team that's
just not the way they're built. Urgency. I just want to see the urgency. Like, it's time. We're there. Let's see 48 minutes of urgency. Go ahead.
I want to see an Anthony Edwards kind of I don't give a bleep tour here, where he just unloads the clip and is really aggressive early on in the game, is talking trash, is doing everything that he can do to kind of instill some swagger.
Nothing else to lose now. I mean, things can't get much worse anyways. Here's Jaden. I like this. The next 5 is going to tell us a lot about their determination given all the frustrations that they have, for sure. We got to get out of here. Great stuff, man. As always, very frustrating nonetheless. Wolves lose 2 in a row. Final score tonight versus the Warriors, 113-103. They dropped to 14-13 on the year. Hey, as always, huge shout out, though, to all you guys in the chat, all the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen and coming in this chat, venting with us from game to game. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Go follow Jack, by the way, if you haven't already, at JR Borman 13. He's usually live from the Target Center during almost every home game. Wolves at Atlanta, that's Monday night, 6:30 p.m. tip-off. Catch you right here, same time, same place. But until then, signing out.